Well, hello there, everyone, and welcome to today's conversation. We are talking about AI and how it is really accelerating and putting some pressure on IT workloads and teams out there. I want to start off with a little bit of a stat. Maybe you've seen this, maybe you haven't, but it comes from IDC, and I think a lot of us trust that source. They're predicting that there could be upwards of 1 billion with a B, 1 billion new AI applications created in just the next 3 years. So, based on that stat, the question is, are you ready for containerized applications and AI in your environments? Can you scale? Can you do it cost effectively? Now, maybe you're answering that question right now. Hopefully, you'll start thinking more about that question and those ideas as we go through our conversation. Again, my name is James Hilliard. Glad to be moderating this Scaling IT for the AI era, discussing some of the challenges out there and also getting into giving you some of the best practices for increasing IT agility and preparing for really the capacity and scale that is required to adopt AI technologies, to modernize your applications, and even modernize your virtualization approaches out there. We'll be exploring how IBM Fusion is helping organizations do things like simplify deployment, unify the data services out there, and really support performance-hungry AI workloads across your hybrid environments. Two smart guys are with me here today. Earl Springer on board, technical solutions architect with Arrow. We're glad to have him. And Dave McDonnell is here, global sales executive for AI, big data analytics, and HPC, part of IBM's storage group and team. So I'm glad to have both these guys in conversation. Earl, often we start at a high level. So that's what I'm going to do with you here today. We know that there's this explosion of AI applications that have already been coming and these containerized workloads, and we just expect, as IDC said, so many more coming. What are your customers saying about this? What are you hearing from them? What pressures are they concerned about moving forward in their IT environments?
Well, thanks, James. Many customers surprisingly are intimidated by containers, right? Most have lived within, the virtual machine world for a couple of decades now, and most have heard of containers. They've had it on their radar, the roadmap to actually investigate and kick the tires on. But many customers, for many customers, I should say, AI is their initial introduction into containerized workloads. So in essence, containerization is almost forced upon them. And AI is one of many workloads, right? Because there's a lot of software vendors now that are basically refactoring, retooling a lot of their stalwart applications as container only. So a lot of customers will be forced to go to containerizations. But like I said, there's a lot of intimidation by it. But once they start embracing containerization, understand the benefits of containerization, it almost becomes strategic for them. Now, from a line of business perspective, right? There's a lot of pressure from line of business on IT itself, right? Line of business, they got that fear of missing out. Oh my God, we got to implement AI. We got to get it into production, and we got to do it yesterday. And IT is obviously put on the hot seat to make this happen. And like most IT organizations, they will actually start a POC in the cloud, right? Proof of concept. 6 months later, they're get the thumbs up from line of business. We're ready to roll. Then they have to bring it on premise, right? And then that's where the fun begins. They run into a lot of issues. It becomes that gift that keeps on giving, for them. They have issues around skills and integrating with legacy systems, a lot of data challenges, right? And they usually tell line of business, oh, we'll have that up and running in 6 weeks. 6 months later, 12 months later, it's still not up into production. So,
And then at that point, so many things often we find have changed. And then sometimes there's some retooling that needs to take place and go back to kind of the drawing board, as it were. So yeah, I think you're laying out something that a lot of folks have had that experience with. Dave, let me mix you in here a little bit, and from your perspective, is this more a compute power idea? Is this a scalability, kind of fundamental to data and storage challenge as well that folks are facing?
Oh, well, infrastructure wise, it's always composed of a three-legged stool, right? Compute, storage, and networking. And you need to have balance between those three things to have a proper functioning system. Put another way, if you don't have that, you've potentially spent a lot of money to have computers or processors sitting idle. And in the AI age, a lot of people are using these NVIDIA GPUs or other accelerators. They're fairly expensive and they're used by fairly expensive employees. So if those are not busy, you've paid a lot of money for a dust collector or a paperweight, right? So you want to have balance. You want to have a balanced system, and AI applications, they require a lot more of this horsepower, right? They require some of these high-end processors, NVIDIA GPUs, or they come from other suppliers as well. Those just tend to be the most widely deployed. Um, and you might think, hey, I'm not doing AI, but I'm using commercial off-shelf software where a lot of those are going to have AI embedded within them. And if your users are going to want to take advantage of them, you're still going to have to apply some of these GPUs, and you're going to have to consider what the implications are for faster network infrastructure and fast storage to feed it and keep it busy. I mean, let's keep it real. You also need to think of even the facility constraints of the weight of them, the cooling, and the power required. So yeah, it's a lot to consider.
And I like what Earl had mentioned, because I hear this from a lot of the IT folks that I talk to, is say, yeah, the businesses are saying, yeah, let's have this, and we needed it 2 days ago, three days ago, last month, last quarter, and that's a challenge, and that does put some stress. I'm assuming you hear that often, Dave, on the IT team saying, yeah, I know, but you got to give me some time on this. I can't just flip a switch.
Well, this is why. Okay, this is why we have this all these efforts we're doing to try to make hybrid cloud real, right? So I know I can get speed in the cloud. I know I can get scalability and I can get simplicity, but almost every organization in the world has a committee looking at their hyperscaler bill. Oh my gosh, it just keeps going up, 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 and up. And they have a committee looking at this, not to try to take it to zero, but just try to stop the growth rate. So okay, you want speed, you want scalability, and you want a simple operating model. That takes a new paradigm of thinking to how to develop that on premises. So these are these items we've been focused on because you may have to manage costs and bring things on premises or data sovereignty, regulation, but you don't want to give up that speed and simplicity that you have in the cloud. So yeah, if you're going to deploy 1 billion AI applications, the expectations are for those to get deployed very quickly. You're trying to beat your competitors or save that money sooner, enhance your service. You want it as quickly as possible.
Absolutely. And again, that pressure, if you're not getting that done, right, that can weigh on that IT team. Earl, let me talk to you from the Arrow perspective and
Sure.
talking to the teams out there that you do, right? They want to adopt AI. I don't talk to anybody anymore that says, "Nah, we're not going to do this," right? We we know this is the era and world we live in. They know these modern applications are coming, but there is a concern about, well, what about our networks? Are they ready for this? And so the question I have for you is, in conversation, is there something that you are able to share with your customer base and say, look, these are a couple of the signs that you need to be aware of. And if this happens to be the case, then maybe your environment's not ready to build out at scale. It's not ready to do what you want it to do that could cause problems. So, what are you seeing there? How do teams really evaluate whether or not they're ready as they stand today for the future?
Yeah, so as been mentioned a couple of times, a lot of customers start off in the cloud, right? They start off with their AI initiative in the cloud. Why? Cloud makes things easy, right? You need more horsepower, a couple of mouse clicks. You have more horsepower. You need more capacity, a couple of mouse clicks. You need more throughput, no problem. very easy in the cloud, right? But eventually there will come that day you have to bring things on premise. Why? Typically, that's where the data is that the organization is going to use. And obviously, there's regulatory requirements, security concerns. Nobody's going to move all their data to the cloud, to support AI initiatives. But they mentioned hybrid cloud. There's no problem in having a combination if you do it strategically. But typically, the fun begins when they try and integrate initially with legacy infrastructure with what they have already. Everybody tries. Then they find out is they don't have enough horsepower. You don't have enough compute resources. Compute requirements are a little different with modern workloads than they are with traditional, right? GPUs, definitely a requirement. Cooling, power and cooling requirements obviously are a little different as well. Networking, right? Data is the fuel for AI. Pretty much all modern workloads today, you need access to the right data at the right time. How are you going to do that if you got a 10 gig network, as an example, right? So this is where they discover that they have issues. They can't fuel their workloads fast enough. And they actually can't generate results fast enough, to provide any value. So that's when they actually have to look at, obviously, updating some of their infrastructure. And again, in terms of data, I can't stress enough just a lot of the data related issues that customers have. They quickly find out how siloed their data is, their data environment is. And as Dave mentioned earlier, there's the whole sovereignty issue, right? Governance and security. A lot of customers, they're challenged in finding their data. Obviously, the larger the organization, the older the organization, the more data they have. Data ends up everywhere. They go through this exercise of trying to find all the data sources. And then they find a lot of dark data along the way. And then it's data that's always been there. No one knows where it came from, but nobody deletes it because they don't want to be yelled at. So customers have to deal with that. And then there's the transformation issue, right? How do you transform that data into something your AI application can understand? And then one issue a lot of customers do, it's an easy workaround, just make copies of the data, right? And then work from that. But then again, the sovereignty issue, a lot of that data contains personally identifiable information. There's governance on it, right? Access control. You lose all that when you make copies. And that creates other headaches.
And usually it's not just one copy, it's that second copy, that third, that fourth. I mean, that data sprawl gets out there when that tends to be the approach for folks. And that, again, back to governance issues, all sorts of challenges.
Yeah, you bring up a good point. So it's typical for organizations to have copies of copies of copies of copies of data. And for AI projects, a lot of times they need the original, right? They need the single source of truth, as it's called. So, because copies get modified along the way.
Yes.
They need to figure out that's a huge challenge for customers as well. So you need obviously the right infrastructure to access all that data and pull all that data when needed.
And you mentioned the idea that most organizations, as they start exploring and looking at themselves, come to the realization that it is going to be a hybrid cloud, type of model for their enterprise. How does your briefly, because we'll give contact information at the end, and folks can find out Arrow's exact process through all that. But how are you helping to make that real for enterprise customers out there to really have a hybrid cloud, really set up and that be the way they move forward?
From an Arrow perspective, yeah, we actually have a solutions lab, right? We call the Arrow Experience Center, and we have a lot of, in our case, IBM technologies that we use, including Fusion, which is could be one of the topics. And we let our IBM business partners and their end user customers come and experience some of those technologies. And of course, hybrid cloud, obviously, a lot of the technologies we work with on the infrastructure side and obviously on the software side directly support hybrid clouds. So we try and show both sides of that experience, how easy it is to transition workloads from on-premise, to cloud-based and back or in between public cloud services. Obviously, OpenShift is the heart and soul of a lot of what we do because it just simplifies that whole process. But we can talk about that um, coming up.
Well, let's do this, Dave. Getting into kind of the role that a modern storage solution, and I use the word modern because that's what folks say about IBM Fusion. So, being a modern approach to storage solutions, how does this help? Why is it something that should be evaluated by teams when they're considering what AI workloads they're using now and will be using in the very near future?
Well, modern applications have a very different architecture. They're built in microservices, they run in containers, they're orchestrated in Kubernetes. So they look a lot different than traditional applications, right? The ones that many of us would have learned how to write back in the day if we took programming courses. So now I've got to deploy these in production. Well, okay, how do I deploy them quickly? How do I back them up? How do I make sure I have disaster recovery or even other advanced data services dealing with data silos like file, block, and object? So Fusion is designed to fill some of those gaps, right? So OpenShift is quickly becoming the de facto commercial enterprise grade distribution for Kubernetes and several other tools to help deploy these modern applications, but it does not include the data services. Okay, so Fusion is complementary to OpenShift to fill in all those gaps, right? To make it enterprise grade, to make it deployable, scalable, resilient, and it's available as software. Now, remember, if we're talking about hybrid cloud, that software has to run in the hyperscalers, and it also needs to be able to run on premises. And then at the other end of the spectrum, we provide a black box, right? A whole engineered solution specifically for this to allow customers to get that faster deployment and a simple operating model. So there's a little homework, right? You have to have the network IP addresses set up, the DHCP configurations. But if the customer does that, and we advise on this, right? We work collaboratively with customers to do this. Now, all of a sudden, from a greenfield environment with no servers, networking, or storage, we can present that high-speed network, a management network, redundancy, servers, and storage. In other words, a production-ready environment with those data services in about half a day, right? And then you load your OpenShift on it, you're ready to go, and within half a day, and you can start loading applications onto it. So goodbye days of 6, 12, or 18 months of getting applications in production. Gone are those days where you got the one cobbled together and figured out, but you're struggling to figure out how you're going to get applications 2 through 20 into production quickly, right? So this is meant to be quick, repeatable, scalable, and to offer all those enterprise grade, the ilities, right? The availabilities and the resilience that you need to be able to deploy production applications.
That sounds like what you're saying is being offered is reducing that friction, right? And that's the word that often comes up. We want to reduce friction to getting things done, and this is one way that I'm tying that together. Earl, you want to jump in?
Yeah, I'm just going to add to that. Since we were on the topic of hybrid cloud, this obviously supports hybrid cloud as well. We can have Fusion software defined running in public cloud service along with OpenShift environment, and customers can do their POCs, in the cloud, and then when they're ready to putting it into production, just shift everything over to an on-premise appliance-based Fusion HCI.
Most customers have that VMware environment that they run on premise. They have one that they run in the cloud, maybe even two clouds, right? They have AWS, and maybe they have a Microsoft relationship as well. And then if they have it already, they have a container environment on premise and usually one in the cloud. Well, that's a lot of different infrastructures to manage, right? So wouldn't it be easier if we had a common set of data services for all of those, so you can manage one set of data services instead of 4 or 5?
Absolutely. Again, reducing friction there. Earl, let's do this. I want to go back and as Dave just brought up, the containerization and container adoption. You had mentioned earlier, it is accelerating. there's some concerns that teams have, right? They've known the technology, they've understood it, but maybe there hasn't been that embracement of it yet. But that really seems like that's the direction that a lot of teams will have to embrace. So, advice from you that you could give IT teams that are going to be moving from traditional virtualization more towards these containerized apps. What are some things that need to be done to kind of get the house in order, get their thoughts around this, and really have this be their model moving forward?
Sure. Obviously, it all starts with planning. You want to start as soon as possible, right? Do some research into, look at what your organization depends on from an application perspective. Look, especially the critical ones first. Look at their roadmaps. If they're like third-party vendor, is there plans to containerize those applications? How soon, right? Because that'll help determine ramp-up time if there's going to be a need. Um, does the company have custom built applications in-house, right? Are there any plans to refactor them into microservices, which Dave was talking about earlier, right? So, and it all comes down to skills, right? As well. You got to reskill. You can't, it's one of those technologies you don't really want to wing, right? You don't want to Google your way to production. It's a little hard to do. It's a little different, especially if you've lived in that VMware world or Hyper-V world for a period of time. It can be a bit of a mind shift. But so yeah, it's about shoring up skills, right? Reskilling, maybe acquiring some new talent on your team as well. Somebody that can help guide in that process. Someone who has a bit of, expertise in that area. Um, Testing, right? You got to decide on a platform that you want to use. We're big fans of OpenShift, as you know, and we talked about that. Uh, OpenShift has some benefits because it can run not only containerized environments, right? It could also run virtualized environments as well, side by side. So from an IT perspective, you don't have to have separate teams, one on the container world and one on the VM world. You could have one team do both. So simplified management, common set of tools, APIs to help simplify, um, you know, managing that world. And obviously, trying to figure out what is the low-hanging fruit. If there's a need, and I understand, I don't want to pick on VMware or anything like that, Broadcom, but I understand, they changed their licensing term, and it's creating a lot of angst for customers out there. So some have an urgent need, to rush off of, a particular platform like VMware as fast as possible, right? Figure out what's the low-hanging fruit that can easily, transition over without interruption. And then there are going to be some workloads that are going to apply, you're going to have to apply a little more thought to. And it won't be an easy transition. There'll be some workloads that actually you just can't transition at this point. So it's just a matter of obviously part of the planning, figuring all of that out. And then maybe you want to start small as well. So if you embrace a solution like an OpenShift based solution that supports both containers and VMs, maybe start with a few VMs, new VMs, net new, running alongside your containerized workloads. And then, from then on, try and, maybe migrate some existing VM-based workloads over. So small steps. So basically, the beauty, especially OpenShift, again, my ruthless plug for OpenShift, you can modernize at your own pace, with OpenShift. That's one of its benefits.
And the wink, wink, nod, nod here that I'm reading into what I'm hearing from you is that decisions have to be made. Teams are going to have to plot out what's their direction. And by talking with the Arrow team, by mixing in some folks from IBM, you can figure out because you've seen from other customers, hey, this is what worked for them. Based on what you're telling us, this might work for you. And those are the conversations that we'd love this conversation to lead to, right? For people to really explore that with your team and get some of those insights, correct?
Absolutely.
And again, it's the wink, wink, nod, nod, but I figured it was worth mentioning. Dave, talking about choices, let me throw this your direction. ultimately, right, teams are going to go through a transformation of what they're doing. Kubernetes and AI workloads, they're going to cause teams to rethink performance and data placement, all the things that you kind of had mentioned a little bit earlier. So, can you lay out, there might be several, but your top one or two kind of best practices that IT leaders should be considering to avoid some of the bottlenecks during this type of transformation and making these changes?
Okay, well, it is a challenging path, right? It is a big inflection point. So now I've got this situation where I have some things I need to rethink of on the virtualization side. I have pressure to be able to deploy AI. I have modern applications, and I'm being expected to get ready for these pretty quickly and at large scale, right? So, wow, getting we come back to the simple saying, right? Modern applications need modern infrastructure. So you can simplify at the virtualization level, as Earl said, right? OpenShift virtualization allows you to run container and VM-based applications. It gives you the capability to deploy them on-premise or in the cloud or both. So what you want is flexibility, you need agility, and you need scalability, right? So there aren't going to be many people that can offer an enterprise-grade experience to do this with the right security and all those other attributes. So you've got to be thinking not only how do I deploy this one application, but where do I want to be in 1, 3, and 5 years from now, and then work backwards from there, so that hopefully some of those short-term learnings that you go through allow you to pave a path that basically open up a highway for you to be able to scale, do it simply, and free up your people to be as empowered as possible to deliver that higher throughput and the high expectation of quality and enterprise capability that the organization's gonna expect.
We kind of mentioned at the beginning some wanted to share some best practices, kind of what others are doing, because I think that's a great place for so many teams to learn and see. And sometimes, look, IT folks are so busy doing what they're doing on a day-to-day basis, just being able to look up and say, what did others do? Right. And then they have to consume that and see if it works for them. But on that front, back to this idea of modernization, Earl, and if a team is out there building, and briefly, what are a couple initiatives that they might want to consider prioritizing first? Maybe these are things that others have prioritized and it's led them to a good outcome.
Sure. Well, again, all begins with planning, right? So there's this whole concept of technical debt, right? This is where maintaining legacy basically robs money from the budget, right? Takes a big chunk of the IT budget. We've seen customers that about 80% of their budget was going towards maintaining legacy systems, right? Obviously, that robs them of the ability to modernize, right? To invest in modernization, or it hinders them. So first thing I would do, and based on what some of our successful customers have done, is they look at what investments they can make right now that'll have the biggest bang for the buck and help free up, some of that legacy invest or payments that they're doing out of their budget, right? So how do they free up some of that budget? Instead of spending 80% of their budget maintaining legacy, how do we get it down in the first year down to 70, as an example, which frees up some money, and we can take that money and invest it in some modernization initiatives, right? And just keep doing that. Keep finding the lowest hanging fruit to tackle first, and get the biggest bang for the buck. Help reduce that technical debt. And in the long run, the risk of not doing it is obviously it's going to be a lot more expensive down the road, right? So it's best to start as soon as possible.
And Dave, to that end, I always love to try and see if I can draw out any stories or examples, cases, where things have worked for others. So in the case here of IBM Fusion, do you have top of mind, anecdotally, ideas about somewhere where it has helped improve an organization's agility, or did reduce some of the costs, at scale? What comes to mind when I ask that?
Oh, well, it's easy to come up with examples. We do survey our customers and our account teams. Why did the customer see interest in this? Why do they buy from us? And the number one reason we hear is to increase time to value. In other words, to be able to deploy more quickly. And then the number two reason, a single one vendor support experience, right? If you think about it, these are those cloud-like attributes, right? Speed and simplicity. And then a lot of times as well, it's to solve a challenge on the backup or the DR side. So those are kind of the top three reasons. So we had an interesting bit of feedback from one of our banking customers. They bought us to increase their speed and agility. They loved that they had the ability to consume these services as software or an appliance. So they defined these different landing zones, one on their favorite hyperscaler, one on VMware, one on bare metal x86, and then one on our appliance. So they had agility and they could tie some of these things together with a common set of data services. The interesting comment they made was, we had a container team, we had an AI team, but using your HCI system very quickly gave me an operating model for both. So it would save time, maybe a year or two of the learning curves for both teams to learn the other side. So that's one anecdote I'll quickly share. Another one, and this one's a little shorter, a college, and actually this is public. They don't mind us mentioning their name, Albert Einstein College of Medicine. They got a $1 billion donation with the goal of making tuition free. What happens to the number of applications? Does it go up or down? It goes up a lot, right? Cost of education here in the United States, very, very costly. So now what do? Do they go and hire 300%, 3x or 5x the admission staff? Well, no, they didn't want to do that. So they're using AI to now help screen the applications. You know, these are 60 to 85 page PDFs, and to cull down and narrow down what humans look at. Now, you have to be able to deploy that quickly. The school timelines, they're not flexible. We all know when classes start, we know when applications are submitted, and we know when results have to be given to prospective students. So we helped them get an application into production, which was unprecedented. They'd never been able to go from something that came so quickly and then get into production so quickly. And as you can imagine, this is a very highly visible public thing. If they don't handle this process well, it would create a lot of negative publicity. They could get accused of favoritism inappropriately and bias, right? So it has governance attached to it. So it's hard to get all of those things implemented extremely quickly. This was about a 4-week process to production, which is pretty mind-blowing when you think of comparing that to the world of traditional IT.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you just look at the stats on how long it typically takes organizations to get at least their first AI application into production. Months. So earlier in the year, I was speaking at
Earl, sorry, I have to make a little joke here, right? If you ask them in that big meeting what their target is, they'll say 6 weeks, right? But if you take them out for dinner and maybe they have a beverage or two, they might whisper, yeah, but it's really taking us 18 months or something, or 8 months. Sorry, I think I interrupted you. Go back.
No worries. No, you're right. I mean, it literally turns into a science project for organizations, setting up, especially from an infrastructure perspective. OpenShift, there's a lot of, I'm embracing OpenShift, but I'm also going to state that it has some complexity to it, right? So it has one of those things that has to be done right. There's a lot of interoperability issues, and customers who are trying to wing it, they run into issue after issue, and especially when they try and, as we call, do it yourself on their own infrastructure or mixed infrastructure. There's a lot of finger pointing. And Dave, you mentioned simplified support. It's just one number to call basically for a fusion system. The do-it-yourself approach, you have all these different vendors in the mix that you may have to interact with, and you get that finger pointing, right? And it just delays the onset of putting something into production.
I once had a customer give a very hostile reception, right, to the introduction of this consideration of an HCI system. And it's a big decision for a company to make a decision to bring in a new platform, right? They have to get trained on it, support it, how to acquire it, how to lifecycle management, the whole thing. And he says, look, I understand why I need your software. That makes sense to me. I have no idea why I would ever consider your appliance. I said, sir, do your stakeholders like you, right? Most people don't like their IT department because we're too slow, right? And what we can bring you is that faster, more agile IT, because now your stakeholders, they usually would have this preference. I would much rather deploy in the cloud to get into production faster. I can give you that on premises, right? And that was where the light switch went on, and it was like, oh my gosh, you're right. This is actually going to help me do something I can't do today. And when you help them do something they can't do today to really make a dramatic improvement in the service they're able to deliver, then it becomes a different conversation.
Guys, let's do this. Again, I'm going to give some contact information for folks and direction for you all to continue the conversation after we wrap up our conversation here today. But kind of want to do a little bit of a rapid fire for the remaining questions and ideas that we wanted to get through. So that's what we'll do. We'll go, kind of thesis level idea of some of these questions. And Earl, one of them that I know comes up all the time, especially now, because the future is coming so quickly at us. There are folks that say, okay, I need to make a choice. I need to make a change. I'm going to make a decision. I'm going to make a spend. How do I make sure it's future proof? How do I make sure that I don't spend today and it's wasted tomorrow? What's something to consider on that front?
Ooh, a lot of considerations. One, you don't want something that's proprietary per se. You want something that supports open standards, right? Preferably even the open source. Open source has got a strong community. A lot of these popular, like Kubernetes as an example, as a platform, for containers. You definitely want maybe even software defined as well, because being software defined removes a lot of limitations of these proprietary appliances, right? Especially when it comes to scalability and flexibility and agility, all the abilities that Dave was mentioning earlier. And you want, obviously, your infrastructure to be able to adapt to the changing needs of not only the workload, but the business itself, right? So, and you definitely want infrastructure that supports automation, because the less human effort, the better, right? You can do things reliably, quickly. You can do things as maybe code. There's that concept of infrastructure as code as well, right? So you want an infrastructure that can support automation through scripting. You want to be able to monitor, right? You need infrastructure that supports API calls and things like that, and definitely hybrid cloud, right? If you can have that seamless experience, with hybrid cloud, and I know a lot of like what IBM does. A lot of their infrastructure technologies obviously are designed for hybrid cloud because they understand over 90% of organizations, that's part of their model, right? That's part of their modernization journey is hybrid cloud. So you definitely want that as being able to support. And of course, this is just going to allow the business to adapt as their needs require them to, and help them drive innovation, faster at the end of the day.
Dave, let me have you give me your quick thoughts on looking crystal ball next year, next 2 years, what things will look like for enterprises that are adopting AI at scale and what they can be doing today to be ready for those changes you see in the next year to 2 years.
Well, it's always helpful to do well in the future if you plan for the future, right? So what am I going to have to do in modernization with commercial applications, in-house applications, or new applications? Those are the big three, right? So an inventory of where the puck is going, so to speak, for those three. And then I think we touched on it, that virtualization conversation, right? Where do I want to be with virtualization to run VM and container-based applications in 12 to 24 months? That's what I'd suggest as a starting point.
And Earl, in terms of Arrow, how are your teams staying up to speed? What are you doing to make sure that you guys are ready there to help with modernization efforts that the customers need?
Oh, wow. Yeah. Well, it all comes down to skills. We constantly are reskilling ourselves, staying in tune with what is happening. Obviously, we get a lot of help from IBM as well, a lot of guidance. We meet with IBM on a regular basis to help give us that guidance. IBM actually provides us with a lot of technologies that we use in-house to not only educate ourselves, but we have something called the Earl Experience Center, which I mentioned earlier. We actually build that. I'm part of a team of probably 25 people that are focused just on IBM. And we set up and stage a lot of the IBM technologies. Fusion HCI has really become the hub of everything we do within the Aero Experience Center, at least from an IBM perspective. We work closely with other teams like Red Hat, other vendors as well, NVIDIA, of course. And we actually run real world workloads in our experience center. So we can do demos, we can help our IBM business partners do proof of concepts or proof of technologies with their customers as well. We do a lot of functionality testing on behalf of IBM. And of course, we allow people to play with the actual technology.
And that's the important part, right? Getting their hands on, seeing what this can do for them, not just what is, said by organizations of this is what it can do for you, but showing them what it really can do with their data, with their systems, et cetera. And Dave, that kind of goes last question to you. It's at a high level again, but it's not just what IBM is promising about Fusion, but what do customers that have rolled Fusion out, what do they ultimately come back and say to you that, yeah, this was promised and we got this and maybe a little bit more, but it's the idea of how it's received to the customers out there.
So our customers are generally very happy. Each quarter, we add a number of new logos, but still about 30% of our business is repeat business. So if it helps them do something faster and enhances their agility, they're happy to come back and add more to it. So we're doing that on a regular basis. We also have, since it's such a new area and growing so quickly, we have very active customers. So they seem very happy to come back to tell us what they like, to give us input on roadmaps. We started up user groups now, which we roll out internationally. And almost each year now, we're actually doubling in attendance. So very active, very vibrant user community, which is, of course, fantastic. So that helps us ensure we're on the right track with the prioritization decisions that we're making as we're adding new features. And of course, the customers are always excited to have the new features. And we've rolled out a lot in 2025, and we have a pretty exciting 2026 lined up. So we get a lot of confidentiality agreements signed where we get into these discussions and get that feedback. Honestly, it's a fun part of the technology market to work in because of it and because it's changing so quickly.
Absolutely. No, part of the journey. Let's do this. I want to give you each a 30-second, right? This is right before we give you some go-to and call to action type stuff, folks. The 30-second kind of final advice, right? Related to our conversation here today, something that folks can be thinking about or doing tomorrow that will get them even further down the line to making some of these decisions that they need to make and having some more of these conversations. Earl, or start with you, that kind of final piece of advice today.
Awesome. Yeah, my piece of advice for anybody in IT is first embrace change, right? Lead the way to modernization, reskill, embrace technologies like hybrid cloud. Don't be afraid of AI. Be the solution, right? Find ways to help reduce that technical debt we were talking about earlier. Drive efficiencies. Don't be afraid of automation, and really spearhead your organization to not only saving a lot of money, but driving innovation as well.
And Dave, you final thought there.
Well, my input's going to be similar to Earl's. We need to learn to speak that language, right? We need to learn to speak AI and modernization. What's more likely, right? Are the data scientists of the world or the analysts, are they going to learn the 7 layers of the OSI model for networking? Are they going to learn the difference between DAS, direct attached storage, SAN, and NAS? Or are we going to have to learn about Kubernetes, OpenShift, and tokens in the AI world, right? It's the latter, not the former, right? So our jobs are changing quickly. It's putting a lot of pressure on us, right? So we need to be able to adapt quickly to the needs of the line of business. And from the view of the world of the data scientists, they might look at us as nothing more than a provider of tokens, as an example, right? So if you're an IT professional and you don't know how to speak that language yet, my advice, that's something you want to learn. The good news is there's a lot of good places you can go to for help. There's a lot of good resources, some of them online. And the offer I'll make is we can offer a very good technology discussion with Arrow and some of our Arrow partners to help customers with these challenges.
Well, perfect place to wrap things up on. Again, folks, talking about AI powered computing really isn't a future discussion anymore. It's a now. Get ready so that you can take advantage of the very immediate future and then a bit more of that long-term future out there. Big thanks to Earl over there at Arrow and Dave from IBM for having this conversation, giving us some more ideas to think about. And again, ultimately, that's what we'd love you to do, is to continue the conversation. So on our platform, you're able to have some more resources that are available to all of you. So I encourage you to check out those provided resources. Connect with the teams at Arrow. Again, IBM Storage as well. You reach out to the Arrow team. They're going to be able to pull in the folks from IBM to have that conversation, really understand what you are about, what you are trying to set about doing, and then get you moving in the direction that you want to. So with that, appreciate again everyone taking time to join us on behalf of the Arrow and IBM Storage teams. Thanks for being here. My name is James Hilliard, and we do look forward to talking to you all down the road.